Welcome to What Matters, a podcast that looks inward at unique experiences, upward for divine direction, and outward at God's activity in the world. I'm Michelle Funk, your podcast host. I'm so glad you're here with us today. I'll just encourage you, hit the subscribe button, and that way you won't miss any of our upcoming episodes. Again, thanks for joining us today. I'm excited to introduce you to my guest, Ashley Morgan Kirk, who is here today joining me in conversation about Advent. It seems like it's worthy to have some conversation about this great time of year, even in the midst of the chaos of all things. Thank you, Ashley, for being here. I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit further. How's that?
Sure. Thanks, Michelle, for having me.
Yeah.
I'm Pastor Ashley Morgan Kirk. I'm one of our care pastors, our congregational care pastors here at the Leawood campus at Resurrection. And so I think Advent, something we do every year, right? But everything we've done this year has changed. And
Different.
so just as Christians, even like we always celebrate this season. And yet even though we celebrate it all the time, we can learn new things, especially this year. So Advent is kicking my butt this year. Can I be honest with you?
Love it.
It's making me so mad. Here's why. Okay.
Yeah.
So I love theology.
Yeah.
And I've spent a lot of years chasing after it. And in a lot of ways, and I share this personally, but just about who I am, but in a lot of ways, I started that pursuit because I really wanted to figure out who God was and just kind of figure that out and move on in life.
Right.
And that's not really how God works at all. And yet still that's my inclination at times. And sometimes theology can be that, those beliefs and even thoughts or sometimes even doctrines about who God is that we have. And so when it comes to Advent this year and why it's kicking my butt, I started thinking, I was like, Michelle and I are going to talk. I'm going to have something good to say, something.
Or not. It's good. It's
Or
good.
just words.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, what does Advent always teach me? And it always teaches me to wait. And so Michelle, I really got into waiting. I was like, here's what I could talk about waiting and how it teaches us, to slow down and all these beautiful theological thoughts.
Right.
And then I have a friend who's waiting and has a cancer diagnosis and is waiting on treatment.
So
right?
sorry. Yeah.
And then as a care pastor, it's almost as if that same example of buying a car and then seeing it everywhere. So I was like, I really wanted to be beautiful and theological about waiting. Then this friend, and then it just seems like over the last few weeks, seeing other people in lots of different waiting situations and realizing, it's not just beautiful, it's exceedingly hard.
Yeah.
And
You're
what's
right.
the difference for us when it comes to Advent and waiting and what we can learn?
Yeah. Oh,
So,
it's going to be
I know.
good. Not to mention, we've all been waiting
Yeah.
a long time.
This year.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
With no known, and
Yeah.
and I even watched. I'm sure that there are people out here who watch this as well. I watched an SNL skit about.
Yeah.
Now we know. What do we really know?
Right.
In terms of what's next with the vaccine. So
Yeah.
we continue to wait, and it's hard work, and it's been hard work. I think harder on all of us than we realize.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
anyway.
Yes.
So that is where
where
I'm
we're
starting.
going. Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I've been thinking about not just this beautiful idea that it teaches us to wait with hope, but also the reality. I read Ecclesiastes this morning and the 3rd chapter about seasons
Yeah.
and about there's a season for everything. And it's sharing, in some sense, this is our expectation of the world, that there is a season that good will be prevalent. There are seasons that it'll be hard, and there's everything in between.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking about my human kind of want to always be in the good. I want it to always be that. And it's a lot harder to be in the hard, right? And it's a lot harder to sit with it too.
Yeah.
And so I just come to this conversation thinking I had this beautiful theological thought about waiting and everything. And then I just got hit, in the face with real life
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what that means.
Well, and not to, go on and on about the name of this podcast, but you got hit with what matters. With really what matters, even though you wanted to go in a beautiful,
Right.
meaningful direction.
Yep.
What matters just kind of keeps popping up. Yeah. Well,
And it's the truth of our lives, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more. Tell me more.
So I got to thinking, what makes it different then for us as Christians who wait? And if we're always practicing this annual time of Advent where we wait for and intended to wait until Christmas to say, like, this is Jesus coming into the world with, God with flesh on, light in the darkness, that sort of thing. We spend 4 weeks in it.
Yeah.
But we also lift up all these other things, the lights that are in the world of love and hope, joy, faith.
Yeah.
The difference, I think, for waiting for us is that we know, it's kind of what Ecclesiastes says, we know that seasons change, but our God doesn't, and that God everlasts. I mean, it's one of the things we lift up all the time, everlasting. Someone that is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Right. And that's so different than our life in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so how can I find that steadiness, right, with God who is an everlasting in a time that it seems like nothing lasts,
Yeah.
And also the promise, nothing lasts forever. Right. This pandemic does not last forever.
Right.
We know that.
Yeah.
But it's also right now, and it's lasting. It feels like it's lasting.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with waiting comes churning, right? You talked about just the state of things right now. They've been churning for some time every day. It seems like there's something new and not so great, that we are learning, and yet we still wait.
Yeah. Treading water. I mean, you're saying churning. It makes me think about treading water and how that's, usually we don't think it's helpful. Here's one way in which at least treading water, the idea of it churning or something, sitting with something for a long time helps you. I was a lifeguard in high school and into college, and I had to be excellent at treading water.
Yeah.
Because I had to be ready if I needed to help someone, to be able to keep myself up, but then also be able to keep them up in their, in a time of need.
Right.
And so, that's another thing that waiting can do. It can prepare you for what's next.
Yeah.
I think about my friend who's waiting to figure out the treatment for his cancer diagnosis. And I think I'm checking in with him. I'm watching what he's doing. And he is preparing in some ways for a time where he might not feel so great. And so he's doing things that he loves, and spending his energy doing those things, knowing, like, in a hopeful manner that I'm not going to feel so great probably for a season, but then I'll be able to get back to these kinds of things.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do them now in preparation.
Yeah.
As I wait for the next season that I know is to come.
Yeah. Yeah. Stockpiling some experiences to maybe draw upon during that time when he's likely not going to feel well.
Yeah.
Oh, how hard.
It is hard.
Yeah. That doesn't sound as pretty and
I know.
beautiful as
It doesn't.
but,
It doesn't.
But yet important.
Another thing that it makes me think about, and I apologize, Michelle, I'm kind of like a squirrel brain.
That's okay.
So
It's
another thing I was thinking about is there's a book I read. It's called Liturgy the Ordinary. And have you read it?
I know of it.
It's a really great
I have
book.
it. I want to pull it out. Okay.
It's kind of a mixture of this theological thinking, but then also grounding it in our everyday stuff and makes things really real. And since I spend so much time at home, don't we all, right?
Yes. Right.
It talks about loving people like our living room furniture. So things, the things that we spend time with all the time, our living room furniture,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How to really love those people best. She also talks about how when people come over to our homes, we like panic clean,
Guilty. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And why do we do that?
Yeah.
So it's that fear of like, I need to be seen a certain way, maybe, or the house needs to be this way because it's a representative of me or where I am or how well I'm doing or I don't know, all those other things, right? And she encourages us to invite people in even when it's messy
Yeah.
and be okay.
Right.
That's really hard for me.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
I'm panic clean all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think about like, how do we, in those moments, as I'm walking, as somebody who's a pastor, walks alongside people in messiness and like just asks,
Yeah.
let me in. It's okay.
Right.
I'm not going to judge you.
Right.
I want to be with you in this.
Yeah.
And just learning that's important too. And so like, I think it's connected for me in terms of waiting in that way of waiting isn't necessarily the destination we want to be at, right? Like that messy house is not necessarily the place we want to be at, especially when people encounter us.
But it's maybe a more authentic
Yeah.
connection,
Yeah.
And to know that you're not going to be judged, that no one's going to come in and say, "My, you are so irresponsible." I mean, I guess that's what I worry about, Oh, I'm going to appear to. But in all of the times, which have been many, that people have entered my house when it has not been spotless, this happens often.
Yeah.
No one has ever turned around and stomped out and said, "Good grief, you're a mess." I mean, it's almost like it's a more authentic, real connection.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what we are doing right now as we wait. Maybe we're experiencing a little bit more of an authentic, real, vulnerable connection, would you say?
I think the pandemic has made us that, like, forced us to look inward a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's not as much outward distraction.
Right.
And I mean, waiting, we do a lot of that even in our own, inward thoughts, sometimes before we even share them out loud.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think about how important it is to do that ultimately, right?
Yeah.
Because this friend, and even just in other care moments too, we can share. Sometimes we do experience hopelessness. Sometimes we do experience a feeling of we're not loved, or something we carry around and believe, or a lack of joy, or a lack of faith, and those are all the things of Advent that maybe if we were all rushing towards Christmas like we normally do, we wouldn't necessarily reflect on that so much, or even in the hardness of what this year has been, be realistic that there can be spaces that are hard for us to grasp those things.
Yeah.
But that ultimately, God wins the day, right?
Yeah.
So we get to Christmas and
Yeah.
God shows up in the mess.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a mess.
Yeah. Right. Right.
It wasn't a perfectly put together living room,
Uh-huh.
And so now I'm waxing theological, but you know what I'm saying? I love, it's always moves me every year. It's moving me in a different way this year, but it moves me every year that God cared so much to show up and show us.
Yeah.
And in the midst of whatever,
Yeah. That he still does that now.
Absolutely.
Shows up
Yeah.
and shows us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Advent is an invitation to. How would you answer that? And would that be, you think that's a different answer maybe this year?
I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, I would say wait, and I'm
Yeah.
both mad about it and glad about it, because it reminds me that life isn't just all of the things, like hope, joy, faith, and peace, and then the magnificent gift of Christmas. It is also like all of that in between.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that should be the invitation every year. Maybe it's just a bit pronounced this year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
And maybe it's teaching us that it's okay to carry this lesson forward, even into next year's Advent, which will most hopefully be different. But it will also have its times of waiting on maybe not the best news, or waiting on more news about not the best news, or, waiting on something or the other. And so it's a good lesson to carry forward, I guess is what I'm trying to say for Advent this year. So we talk a little bit about inward experiences, personal experiences, right? And then we talk a little bit about, on this podcast, about, how we seek God's direction, and then how we see God's activity in the world. Are you seeing anything different this Advent with regard to that? Are you getting a different sense of direction? You kind of admitted yes.
Yes.
Are you seeing God's activity? How does it look this year?
I think that, and I admitted to this in another place too, so it's well known, maybe.
Yeah.
But the thing that moves me each year is that it's Emmanuel, God with us. Like, I mean, we just heard a sermon on it, but that's the thing that gets me every year. And this year in particular, I think has taught me not just to receive that gift, but how important it is to continue to give it to other people. And so, like, this time of isolation, right? A time where nothing feels normal, of the importance of how we show up for others. God shows up for us in Jesus, right? But then also in our lives all the time. And so how do we do that? And in really tangible ways, because God had shown up for the Israelites before, perhaps this in the most tangible way of looking like them, of sitting across the table like you and I are right now, eye to eye. That's very different, right? So tangible, the most tangible way.
Yeah.
And so I've had people write me cards. I mean, I've had people drop things by my house, like little gifts and that sort of thing. And I've just tried to up my game, basically, at showing up in people's lives.
Right.
When it's trickier, it takes more creativity, but also not just my people, but people.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And Advent kind of encourages us to do this.
Yeah.
But again, that's something we can carry forward. The God with us moments that we can really demonstrate in a tangible way. We can do that past Advent, past Christmas, past COVID. We can do that. And maybe that's a big encouragement today, even in the times of hard waiting, and maybe even especially in the times of hard waiting, because those times are also going to happen down the road too. They're not just a right now thing, but yeah. Well, I see you have a fun little book here with you today.
I did bring.
Yeah?
I brought this ridiculous book. I love this book. I don't know if you've
I do
ever
too.
read it.
Oh, yes.
Oh, The Places You Go by Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
So I brought it. It's actually really cool. The church that I came from before Resurrection, This was one of my last. I built a sermon series, and this was one of my last sermons with them.
Oh,
And so then
awesome.
that same, you can kind of see this here, they signed throughout the book. And I
Fabulous.
had forgotten, honestly, because I have a couple copies of it. I'd forgotten that this was the one that I brought today. So I popped it open and was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a good example
Right.
of tangibly showing up for someone.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
No
like
kidding.
reading how amazing I am in this book today, right before we have this conversation. Like, okay, this is pretty good.
Perfect.
But the reason why I brought it was every time I recall this book, I think, oh my gosh, this is such a positive, amazing book, and it's so great about life, and that's what we're gonna get when we open it.
Yes.
It's not.
It's not.
Do you remember that?
Dr.
It is
Seuss. How could
not.
you?
Yeah. So at least half of it, if not
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
is about like hard things.
Yeah.
So one of them is about the waiting place. And I know it's silly, but I thought maybe I could share just a tiny bit.
Please. Yeah.
Okay. So he says this: I fear you might be towards the most useless place, the waiting place, for people who are just waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or a mail to come, or a rain to go, or phone to ring, or the snow to snow, or waiting for a yes or a no, or waiting for their hair to grow. Everyone just waiting for the fish to bite, or waiting for to fly a kite, waiting around for Friday night, which I do all the time, or waiting perhaps for their Uncle Jake, or a pot to boil, or a better break, or a string of pearls, or a pair of pants, or a wig of curls, or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. So he says this is not a great place, right?
Right. The useless place. He
Right.
said. Yeah.
No, that's not for you, is the next page. All that waiting and staying, you will find a bright place where boom bands are playing. So now I wouldn't agree with him. I think the waiting place is a productive place, right?
Yeah.
It's 4 weeks of Advent of
Right.
waiting. But the promise is in here too, that that's not where we always stay.
Yeah.
And that seasons, the great things about them is that they change.
Yeah.
And knowing that, at least for us as Christians, we hold on, and knowing that whatever is next is always better.
Yeah.
And that God is always in that space.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It doesn't remain useless even
no.
in
Yeah.
Dr. Seuss's words. And, waiting to me, there are other words, I'm sure, but it makes me think, anticipation, expectation, just this sense of something is to come. And there will be movement beyond the waiting, lessons learned throughout, but yet the movement beyond. And I guess maybe that's the great hope, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think the waiting provides bread for the journey,
Yeah.
and knowing that the journey is a good one that we're on.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. I like this about waiting now.
I'm glad. I mean, it's still really working on me, but
Yeah.
but I'll
A
let it.
little less mad, maybe?
I think I am.
Oh, good.
That's good.
Good. Well, I am trying to see if there's kind of a fun way to wrap us up. So you can let me know if this is doable or not. But so the podcast is called What Matters. So how about just some little rapid fire questions about what matters to you? And they're kind of silly. And
I can't wait.
Okay. They're
I would love silly. That's great.
Good. Okay. So you can answer quickly, whatever, or silly in whatever form and fashion you want. So, all right, what matters? Cookies or cake or pie?
Oh, cake and pie.
Okay. All right.
yeah.
Always. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Good. All right. Very good.
More variety, in my opinion, in that section.
In that section. Okay. Good. All right. Note to self. Ashley likes cake or pie. So hello, Tippins. I'll be calling. Okay. What matters? Watching a movie or watching a series that has multiple episodes to it?
That's hard.
Yeah.
because we're in the pandemic, I'm
Yeah.
going to say a series
Yeah.
because it's longer.
Right. Yes, exactly. You can binge and
Yep.
like spread it out and
Yep.
all of that. Okay. Okay. Good. Good. All right. And just some average, like what matters, coffee or tea?
Oh, man. I mean, coffee. I didn't
Uh-huh.
have any today, which is sad. I usually have it, but
Yeah.
it keeps us running,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, tea has some caffeine,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I feel like more people would join me in the coffee camp.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm with you in the coffee camp, but we love our tea people too. We
it's
do.
true.
If we
It's true.
have to. No, we do. We do. Okay. Last one. And it's also drink related. How about what matters, Pepsi or Coca-Cola?
Oh, wow. Well, this is really hard because I went to seminary in Atlanta and it's like Coca-Cola. I mean,
Country.
everything.
Okay.
Even, yeah, even the university has. So I might be like contractually have to say Coca-Cola. I'm kidding. But my dad loved Pepsi. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think one's more bubbly. And otherwise, I just don't see a difference.
Okay, so no wrong answers. No wrong
Yeah.
answers. Well, thanks for playing my little
That was fun.
What Matters game. And thank you, Ashley, for being with us
Thanks for having
today.
me.
Thanks for talking about Advent, for encouraging us even during the wait, even when it's a hard wait, a
Yeah.
difficult season. And Ecclesiastes 3, I mean,
Always a season.
yeah, and that's a great encouragement for us to take today and carry that forward. So thank you. Thank you for helping us consider what matters
Of course.
during
Glad
Advent.
to.
Blessings. Yay. So thanks for joining us for What Matters with a look inward at unique experiences, upward for divine direction, and outward at God's activity in the world, here and now during Advent as we wait with expectation and anticipation of what's to come. So glad that you joined us today. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you can never miss an upcoming episode. I'm Michelle Funk, your host, and see you next time. Okay. All right.
I think you are good at